Bear Cub was clutching the top of a cargo train, racing through a mountain tunnel. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The mountain air felt cold and sharp that evening when Dakota first heard the sound. She was sitting on the old wooden bench outside Millfield Station, holding her 8-month-old baby Ryder close to her chest. The little boy had been fussy all day, crying and reaching for things that weren't there. Dakota thought the fresh air might calm him down. The cargo train was late. It should have passed through 2 hours ago, but the storm up in the mountains had delayed everything. Dark clouds hung low over the peaks, and the wind carried the smell of rain and something else. Something wild. Ryder suddenly stopped crying. His tiny head turned toward the tunnel entrance and his bright blue eyes grew wide. Dakota felt a chill run down her spine. The baby never got quiet like this. He was always moving, always making noise, always wanting attention. But now he sat perfectly still in her arms, staring at the black mouth of the tunnel. That's when she heard it too. A low rumble that wasn't thunder. The train was coming. The sound grew louder, echoing off the rocky walls inside the tunnel, but there was something else mixed in with the thunder of wheels on tracks, something that made Dakota's heart skip a beat. It sounded like crying. Not human crying, but the desperate wail of an animal in distress. Ryder made a soft cooing sound and reached his chubby hand toward the tunnel. His little fingers opened and closed as if he was trying to grab something from the darkness. Dakota pulled him closer, feeling confused and scared. The headlight of the cargo train appeared first, cutting through the gloom like a bright yellow eye. The engine burst out of the tunnel with a roar that shook the station platform. Car after car followed, metal wheels screaming against the rails as the train began to slow down for its brief stop at Millfield. But as the train cars passed by, Dakota saw something that made her gasp. On top of the third car from the engine, a small brown shape was pressed flat against the metal roof. At first, she thought it might be a bag or some loose cargo, but then the shape moved. It was a bear cub. A tiny, terrified bear cub clinging to the top of a speeding freight train. The cub's fur was soaked from the storm, and its small body shook with fear and cold. Its tiny claws scraped against the metal as it tried to hold on. The poor thing couldn't have been more than a few months old, probably separated from its mother during the storm. Dakota stood up quickly, her mind racing. She had to do something. She had to help. But what could she do? The train was still moving, even though it was slowing down. And even if it stopped completely, how could she reach the cub on top of the car? It was too high, too dangerous. Ryder began to whimper in her arms. But it wasn't his usual cranky cry. This was different. Softer. Sadder. As if the baby somehow understood what was happening to the frightened animal above them. The train continued to slow, its brakes hissing and squealing. Dakota could see the cub more clearly now. Its dark eyes were wide with terror, and its small mouth was open as it panted with exhaustion. How long had it been riding on top of that train? How far had it traveled from its home? She looked around the station platform desperately. Where was the station master? Where were the workers? Surely someone else had seen the cub by now, but the platform was nearly empty, just her and Ryder, and an old man sitting on a bench at the far end, reading a newspaper and paying no attention to anything else. The train was almost at a complete stop now. This was her chance. Maybe her only chance to save the terrified cub. But how? She couldn't leave Ryder alone, and she couldn't take him with her if she tried to climb onto the train car. Ryder's whimpering grew louder. He squirmed in her arms and pointed again toward the train with his tiny finger. His blue eyes were filled with tears, but not the angry tears she was used to seeing when he was hungry or tired. These were different tears. Concerned tears, as if her 8-month-old baby was trying to tell her something important. The train came to a complete stop with a final hiss of air brakes. The cub lay flat against the roof of the car, its small chest rising and falling rapidly. It was exhausted and scared, but still alive, still holding on. Dakota felt her heart pounding as she realized what she had to do. But first, she needed help. She needed someone else to see what she was seeing, someone who could actually do something about it. She took a deep breath and called out as loudly as she could, "Help! Someone help! There's an animal on the train!" Her voice echoed across the empty platform, but nobody seemed to hear her. The old man with the newspaper didn't even look up. The wind from the mountain swallowed her words and carried them away into the darkness. Ryder suddenly let out a cry that was unlike anything Dakota had ever heard from him before. It wasn't his normal baby cry. It was deeper, more urgent, almost like he was trying to communicate something specific. The sound pierced through the night air with surprising strength for such a small child. The bear cub on top of the train car lifted its head at the sound. Its dark eyes locked onto Ryder's face, and for a moment something passed between them. A connection that Dakota couldn't understand but could definitely feel. The cub's crying became softer, almost like it was responding to the baby's call. That's when Dakota noticed something that made her blood run cold. The cub wasn't just scared and exhausted. It was injured. A dark stain was spreading across the fur on its left side, and one of its tiny paws hung at an odd angle. The poor creature had been hurt, probably when it first fell or jumped onto the moving train. "Oh my God," Dakota whispered, pulling Ryder closer. The baby had stopped crying now and was staring intently at the wounded cub. His little hand reached out again, fingers stretching toward the train car as if he could somehow bridge the impossible distance between them. The train gave a mechanical groan, and Dakota's heart sank. It was preparing to move again. The brief stop at Millfield Station was almost over, and soon the train would continue its journey through the mountains. The injured cub would be carried away into the storm, growing weaker with each passing mile. But then something unexpected happened. As the train's engine began to rumble back to life, a figure emerged from the shadows near the station house. It was a woman Dakota had never seen before, tall and lean with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore the dark uniform of a railroad worker, but something about her seemed different. Her movements were too quiet, too careful, like someone who spent time in the wilderness. The woman's eyes immediately found the cub on top of the train car. She didn't seem surprised to see it there, which struck Dakota as very strange. Most people would have been shocked, maybe even frightened. But this woman just nodded to herself, as if she had been expecting this. "You saw it too," the woman said, walking over to Dakota. Her voice was calm but carried an odd tension. "The little one on the train." "Yes. We have to help it. It's hurt and scared and—" Dakota started to explain, but the woman held up a hand to stop her. "That cub has been riding the rails for 3 days now," the woman said quietly, "following the train route through 5 different mountain passes. We've had reports from other stations, but nobody has been able to catch it." Dakota stared at her in confusion. Following the train route? But why would a bear cub do that? And how do you know so much about it? The woman looked at Ryder, who was still reaching toward the train with his tiny hands. The baby's eyes were bright with unshed tears, and his whole body seemed to strain forward with concern for the wounded animal. "Because," the woman said slowly, "that cub isn't just lost. It's looking for something, or someone." A chill ran down Dakota's spine that had nothing to do with the mountain wind. What do you mean?" Before the woman could answer, the train's whistle blew long and loud. The engine was picking up speed, preparing to pull away from the station. The bear cub struggled to lift its head again, its injured paw dangling uselessly as it tried to maintain its grip on the slippery metal roof. Ryder let out another one of those strange, urgent cries, but this time something incredible happened. The cub responded with a soft whimper that sounded almost like an answer, as if the baby and the bear were having a conversation that only they could understand. The railroad woman's eyes widened. She looked from Ryder to the cub and back again, her face filled with an expression Dakota couldn't read. "That's impossible," the woman whispered. "But I've heard stories." "What stories?" Dakota demanded. But the train was moving faster now. The car with the cub was already passing by them, and soon it would be gone into the darkness of the mountains. The woman suddenly sprang into action. She ran alongside the slow-moving train, keeping pace with the car that carried the cub. But instead of trying to climb aboard, she did something that shocked Dakota to her core. She began to make sounds. Not words, but soft grunts and low calls that sounded exactly like the noises a mother bear would make to her cubs. The injured cub on top of the train turned its head toward the sound, its ears perking up with sudden hope. But the train was moving too fast now. The woman couldn't keep up. And within moments the car with the cub disappeared around a bend in the tracks, heading deeper into the mountain wilderness. Dakota stood on the platform, holding Ryder tight, her mind reeling with questions. Who was this mysterious railroad woman? How did she know so much about the cub? And why had she made those bear sounds, as if she could actually communicate with wild animals? The woman walked back to where Dakota was standing, breathing hard from her run alongside the train. Her face was grim, and there was something in her eyes that looked like deep personal pain. "My name is Sage," she said simply. "And that cub up there isn't just any bear. It's been separated from its family and it's trying to find its way back to them. But the route it's taking..." She paused, looking troubled. "The route it's taking is dangerous. More dangerous than you could imagine." Ryder made a soft cooing sound and reached his hand toward Sage. The woman looked down at the baby with surprise, then gently touched his tiny fingers with her own. "Your little one has a gift," Sage said quietly. "Some children are born with the ability to connect with wild animals in ways that adults can't understand. It's rare, but it happens. And right now, that connection might be the only thing that can save the cub's life." Dakota felt her world tilting sideways. "What are you talking about? Ryder is just a baby. He can't even walk yet." Sage looked at her with serious eyes. "The train that cub is riding? It's not going to any ordinary destination. Tomorrow morning, it's scheduled to cross Devil's Bridge, the highest and most dangerous railway bridge in these mountains. The weather forecast is calling for freezing rain and high winds. No animal could survive that crossing while clinging to the outside of a train car." Dakota's heart clenched with fear for the brave little cub. "Then we have to stop the train. We have to do something." "The next station is Pinecrest, about 40 miles up the mountain," Sage said. "If we can get there before the train does, we might have a chance to save the cub. But we'd have to leave now, and the mountain roads are treacherous in this weather." Dakota looked down at Ryder, who was watching Sage with intense curiosity. The baby seemed to understand that something important was happening, even if he couldn't grasp the details. "Why would you help us?" Dakota asked. "You don't even know me." Sage was quiet for a long moment, staring up at the dark mountains where the train had disappeared. When she finally spoke, her voice was filled with old sadness. 3 years ago, I lost my daughter in these mountains. She was camping with friends when a landslide blocked their path back to civilization. Search and rescue looked for weeks, but they never found her. Sage's hands clenched into fists, but the bears did. A mother bear and her 2 cubs found my daughter and stayed with her, keeping her warm and protected until the rescue team finally reached her location. Dakota gasped. She survived? Sage shook her head slowly. She died 2 days before they found her, but the bears had covered her body with pine branches and leaves, the way they protect their own cubs when they die. They had treated her like family. Tears glistened in Sage's eyes. Ever since then, I've felt like I owe the bears a debt. And when I see a cub in trouble like this one— She didn't finish the sentence, but Dakota understood. This was personal for Sage. The injured cub represented a chance to repay the kindness that bears had shown to her daughter in her final moments. Ryder suddenly started crying again, that same urgent sound he had made when he first saw the cub. But now his cry seemed even more desperate, as if he somehow knew that time was running out. Sage looked at the baby with amazement. He knows, doesn't he? He knows the cub is in danger. Dakota felt tears starting to flow down her own cheeks. The whole situation seemed impossible, like something out of a dream. But Ryder's reaction was real. The connection between her baby and the injured bear cub was real, and if there was even a chance they could save the poor animal— "Okay," she said, surprising herself with her own determination. "Tell me what we need to do." Sage's eyes lit up with a mixture of hope and urgency. "My truck is parked behind the station house. It's got 4-wheel drive and chains on the tires. We can make it up the mountain roads, but we need to move fast." As they hurried toward Sage's vehicle, Dakota noticed something strange. Ryder had grown completely calm in her arms, but his eyes remained fixed on the direction where the train had disappeared. Every few seconds, he would make a soft humming sound, almost like he was singing a lullaby. It was a sound she had never heard him make before. "Has he always done that?" Sage asked, noticing the baby's unusual behavior. "Never," Dakota replied, feeling more confused by the minute. Ryder's usually fussy and cranky, especially at night, but ever since he saw that cub, he's been acting completely different. Sage's truck was an old blue Ford with rust spots and dents that spoke of years spent on rough mountain roads. As they climbed into the cab, Dakota caught a glimpse of the truck's interior and gasped. The dashboard and seats were covered with photographs of bears. Not just any bears, but pictures that looked like they had been taken in the wild, close-up and personal. "You study bears?" Dakota asked as Sage started the engine. "More than study them," Sage replied, steering the truck onto the winding mountain road. "I've been tracking the bear families in these mountains for 15 years. I know their territories, their habits, their family groups, and I know something about that cub that's going to make this rescue even more complicated than you think." The truck's headlights cut through the darkness as they began their climb up the steep mountain road. Rain started to spatter against the windshield, and Dakota could feel the vehicle struggling against the wind that whipped down from the peaks above. "What do you mean, more complicated?" Dakota asked, though part of her was afraid to hear the answer. Sage was quiet for a moment, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as she navigated a particularly sharp turn. "That cub belongs to Luna," she finally said. "She's the alpha female of the largest bear family in these mountains. Her territory covers over 50 square miles, and she's fiercely protective of her cubs." Dakota felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold mountain air. So the cub's mother is looking for it. "Luna isn't just looking," Sage said grimly. "She's been following the train route on foot, parallel to the tracks, for the past 3 days. My motion cameras have been picking up her movements. She's staying in the forest, but she's keeping pace with that train, and she's not alone." Not alone? She has 2 other cubs with her, older ones from last year's litter. And here's the thing about Luna that makes her different from other mother bears. Sage paused as thunder rumbled overhead. She's never had contact with humans before. No camping encounters, no garbage raids, no interactions with people at all. She's completely wild, which means she sees humans as a threat to her cubs. Dakota's heart began to race. So if she finds us trying to help her cub, she'll attack first and ask questions later, Sage finished. Luna weighs about 400 pounds, and she can run 30 miles per hour through forest terrain. If she thinks we're threatening her baby, she'll tear us apart without hesitation. Ryder made that soft humming sound again, and both women looked down at him in wonder. Despite the frightening conversation happening around him, the baby seemed perfectly peaceful, as if he understood something they didn't. But here's what I don't understand, Sage continued as they drove deeper into the mountains. How did that cub get separated from Luna in the first place? She's an experienced mother. She doesn't lose track of her babies. As if in answer to her question, a bolt of lightning illuminated the sky ahead of them, followed immediately by a crash of thunder that shook the truck. In that brief moment of brightness, Dakota saw something that made her gasp. On a rocky outcrop about half a mile ahead, silhouetted against the stormy sky, stood the massive figure of a bear. Even from that distance, Dakota could see the animal's enormous size and the way it stood perfectly still, watching the road below. "Sage," Dakota whispered, pointing toward the outcrop. "Is that—" "Luna," Sage breathed, hitting the brakes and bringing the truck to a stop. "She's watching us. She knows we're here." The great bear stood motionless on the rocks, her powerful form outlined against the lightning-filled sky. Even from their position in the truck, Dakota could feel the intelligence in the animal's gaze. This wasn't just a wild creature acting on instinct. This was a mother who was thinking, planning, deciding what to do about the humans who had entered her territory. "What do we do now?" Dakota asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before Sage could answer, something even more extraordinary happened. Ryder began to make a new sound, different from his humming. It was a series of soft grunts and clicks that sounded remarkably similar to the bear calls that Sage had made at the train station. But this was coming from an 8-month-old human baby who had never been exposed to wild animals before. Sage stared at Ryder in amazement. "That's impossible. He's making bear cub distress calls, perfect bear cub distress calls." On the rocky outcrop, Luna's massive head turned slightly, as if she had heard Ryder's sounds even from that distance. The great bear took a step forward, then another, beginning to make her way down from the rocks toward the road. "She's coming," Dakota said, panic rising in her voice. "Sage, she's coming down here." But Sage wasn't looking panicked anymore. Instead, she was staring at Ryder with an expression of wonder and growing understanding. "Dakota, I think your baby is trying to communicate with her. I think he's telling Luna about her missing cub." The idea seemed crazy, but as Dakota looked down at her son, she couldn't deny what she was seeing. Ryder's eyes were bright and alert, focused intently on the approaching bear. His soft grunts and clicks continued, rhythmic and purposeful, like he was speaking a language he had never learned but somehow understood. Luna reached the edge of the road and stopped about 50 feet from their truck. Up close, her size was even more impressive. She stood on her hind legs for a moment, towering 8 feet tall, sniffing the air and studying the vehicle and its occupants. Then she did something that neither Sage nor Dakota expected. She sat down on her haunches and made a soft chuffing sound back toward the truck. It was the same sound that mother bears make when they're trying to calm their cubs. She's responding to him, Sage whispered in amazement. Luna is actually responding to your baby's calls. Ryder's sounds grew more urgent, and he pointed his tiny hand toward the direction where the train had disappeared. Even though he couldn't form words, his message seemed clear. The cub was in danger, traveling away from its family in need of help. Luna's massive head turned to follow the direction of Ryder's pointing. Her keen nose caught the scent of the train's diesel exhaust lingering in the air, mixed with the familiar smell of her missing cub. A low rumble came from deep in her chest. Not quite a growl, but a sound of deep concern. Then Luna did something that made Dakota's heart nearly stop. The enormous bear began to walk toward their truck. "Should we drive away?" Dakota asked, her voice tight with fear. "No," Sage said firmly. "Don't move. I think she wants to communicate with us, or rather with Ryder." Luna approached the driver's side of the truck slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. When she was close enough, she rose up on her hind legs again and placed her massive paws against the window. Her dark eyes looked directly at Ryder through the glass, and the baby looked back without any sign of fear. What happened next would stay with Dakota for the rest of her life. Luna began to make a series of soft sounds, gentle huffs and low moans that clearly carried meaning, and Ryder responded with his own sounds, the same mysterious bear-like calls he had been making since they left the train station. They were talking to each other. A human baby and a wild mother bear were having a conversation through the window of a truck on a stormy mountain road. "This is incredible," Sage whispered, tears streaming down her face. "In 30 years of working with wildlife, I've never seen anything like this." The conversation between Ryder and Luna continued for several minutes. Sometimes Luna would make urgent sounds, and Ryder would respond with equally urgent calls. Other times, their exchange was softer, almost comforting, like a mother reassuring a worried child. Finally, Luna dropped back down to all fours and stepped away from the truck. She looked once more in the direction the train had gone, then back at Ryder. Her message was unmistakable. She understood that her cub was in danger, and she was trusting these humans to help. But then, Luna did something that revealed just how intelligent she really was. She turned and walked to the front of the truck, positioning herself directly in the headlight beams. She sat down and began to make a series of deliberate marks in the dirt with her claws. "What is she doing?" Dakota asked. Sage leaned forward, studying Luna's actions intently. I think she's trying to show us something. Look at the pattern she's making." Luna's claws traced lines in the dirt that looked almost like a map. She made curved lines that could represent the mountain ridges, and straight lines that might be the railroad tracks. Then she made a small mark and looked directly at Ryder, making a soft, questioning sound. Ryder responded with excited babbling, pointing again toward where the train had disappeared. "She's asking where her cub is on the route," Sage realized. "Luna knows these mountains better than any GPS system. She's trying to figure out exactly where her baby is so she can intercept the train." But then Luna made another mark in her dirt map, this one much further along the route. When she looked at it, her whole body tensed, and she let out a sound that was unmistakably distressed. "That's Devil's Bridge," Sage said, her face going pale. "She knows about Devil's Bridge. She knows her cub won't survive crossing it." Luna stood up and looked directly at Sage, then at Dakota, then at Ryder. Her intelligence was unmistakable in that gaze. She was asking for their help, but she was also trying to tell them something important about the danger ahead. Thunder crashed overhead again, and the rain began to fall harder. Luna looked up at the storm, then back at the humans in the truck. Time was running out, and they all knew it. What happened next changed everything. Luna walked around to the back of the truck and did something that defied everything Dakota thought she knew about wild animals. She grabbed the truck's rear bumper with her teeth and began to push. "She wants us to drive faster," Sage said in amazement. "Luna is trying to help us catch up to the train." The massive bear continued to push against the truck, her powerful muscles straining as she tried to speed their journey up the mountain. It was a gesture of cooperation that seemed impossible, yet it was happening right before their eyes. "Sage," Dakota said, her voice filled with emotion, "we have to save that cub. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but because Luna is trusting us. She's counting on us." Sage nodded, wiping tears from her eyes. "Then we better not let her down." As Sage put the truck back in gear and began driving up the mountain road, Luna trotted alongside them, keeping pace with the vehicle despite the steep terrain and worsening weather. Her presence was both reassuring and terrifying. They had the protection and cooperation of the most powerful predator in these mountains, but they also had the enormous responsibility of living up to her trust. Ryder continued to make his mysterious bear sounds, and Luna continued to respond. It was as if the baby was giving her updates on her cub's condition, or perhaps offering comfort during this desperate race against time. But as they climbed higher into the mountains, Dakota began to worry about something else. The storm was getting worse, the roads were becoming more treacherous, and they still had no concrete plan for how to actually rescue a bear cub from the top of a moving train. Even more troubling was a question that had been nagging at her since this whole adventure began. How had Ryder developed this impossible ability to communicate with bears? And what did it mean for his future and for hers? As they drove higher up the winding mountain road, with Luna running alongside the truck like some kind of mythical guardian, Dakota's mind raced with memories she had tried to forget. Memories from when she was pregnant with Ryder, camping alone in these same mountains during her 7th month. She had gotten lost on a hiking trail, wandering deeper into the wilderness than she had intended. As darkness fell and panic set in, she had stumbled and fallen, going into premature labor pains that terrified her. She was miles from help, with no cell phone signal and no way to call for rescue. That night, as she huddled under a rocky overhang trying to stay warm and praying that her baby would be okay, she had heard sounds in the darkness. Soft huffing and gentle movements that she now recognized as bear calls. At the time, she had been too scared and in too much pain to think clearly about what those sounds meant. But now, watching Ryder communicate effortlessly with Luna, Dakota wondered if something had happened that night. Something that had connected her unborn child to the wild creatures of these mountains in ways she was only beginning to understand. "Sage," she said quietly, "can animals sense things about unborn babies? Things that we don't understand?" Sage glanced at her while navigating a particularly steep section of road. Luna had fallen back slightly, but was still keeping pace with them, her powerful legs carrying her up the mountain with surprising grace. "There are stories," Sage said carefully, "old stories from the indigenous peoples who lived in these mountains for thousands of years. They believed that sometimes, when a human child is born in bear territory during times of great danger or stress, the child develops a spiritual connection to the bear spirits." Dakota felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of connection? The ability to understand their language, to sense their emotions, to communicate across the barriers that usually separate our species. Sage paused, then added softly, "They called children like that bear speakers." It was considered a great gift, but also a great responsibility. Before Dakota could respond, Ryder suddenly began crying. Not his usual fussy cry, but the urgent, distressed sound he had been making whenever he sensed the bear cub was in danger. At the same moment, Luna let out a thunderous roar from somewhere behind them that echoed off the mountain walls. "Something's wrong," Sage said, pulling the truck over to the side of the road. "Something's happened to the cub." They got out of the truck and looked around frantically. Luna emerged from the tree line, her massive form tense with anxiety. She approached Ryder again, making those same soft, questioning sounds, but this time her tone was desperate. Ryder's responses were equally urgent. He pointed not toward the direction where the train had gone, but toward a different part of the mountain entirely. His tiny finger shook as he babbled in his strange bear language, tears streaming down his little face. "What is he saying?" Dakota asked, feeling helpless. Sage listened intently to the exchange between Ryder and Luna, her years of experience with bear behavior helping her interpret the conversation. Slowly, her face grew pale with understanding. "The train," she whispered. "The train has stopped. But not at Pinecrest Station like it was supposed to. It's stopped somewhere else, somewhere unexpected." Luna confirmed this with a series of low grunts, then began moving in a different direction, away from the main road and toward what looked like an old, abandoned logging trail. "She wants us to follow her," Sage realized. "But Dakota, that trail leads to the old mining areas. They've been closed for decades because they're unstable and dangerous." "Why would the train stop there?" Dakota asked, climbing back into the truck with Ryder. Sage started the engine and began following Luna down the narrow, overgrown trail. Tree branches scraped against the truck's windows, and the path was so rough that they had to drive at walking speed to avoid damaging the vehicle. "I don't know," Sage admitted. "But freight trains don't stop unless there's an emergency or a mechanical problem. And if the train is stranded in the old mining area with that injured cub still on top—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Dakota understood. If the train was stopped in an isolated area, the cub would be even more vulnerable. It couldn't jump down from the train car because of its injured paw, but it also couldn't survive much longer without food, water, and medical attention. As they followed Luna deeper into the abandoned mining area, the landscape around them grew increasingly eerie. Old rusted equipment sat scattered among the trees, and the remains of mining structures cast strange shadows in the truck's headlights. This part of the mountain had been scarred by decades of industrial activity, then left to be reclaimed by nature. After 20 minutes of slow, difficult driving, they finally saw lights ahead through the trees. The freight train sat motionless on the tracks, its diesel engine silent. But something was wrong with the scene. There were too many lights, and they were moving around in patterns that suggested human activity. "There are people there," Dakota said, squinting through the windshield. "Lots of people." Sage brought the truck to a stop behind a stand of pine trees where they could observe without being seen. What they saw made both women gasp in shock. The train was surrounded by vehicles and people, but these weren't railroad workers or rescue personnel. These were men in dark clothing carrying equipment that looked military or scientific in nature. They had set up bright floodlights around the train, and several of them were using what appeared to be tranquilizer guns and capture nets. "Animal control?" Dakota wondered aloud. But Sage's expression was grim. "Number. Those aren't government vehicles. Look at the license plates. They're all from out of state. And that equipment they're using. Dakota, I think these are poachers." The horrible realization hit Dakota like a physical blow. The train hadn't stopped because of mechanical problems. It had been deliberately stopped by people who knew about the bear cub riding on top. People who wanted to capture it. But how did they know? Dakota asked, her voice shaking with anger and fear. Sage's face was hard with fury. Someone's been tracking the cub's movements just like I have, but instead of wanting to help it, they saw an opportunity to capture a young bear for illegal sale. Bear cubs are worth thousands of dollars on the black market. People buy them as exotic pets or for private zoos or worse. Luna had stopped at the edge of the tree line, and her low growls indicated that she understood the danger as well. Her maternal instincts were in overdrive, but even a bear as powerful as Luna couldn't take on a group of armed humans alone. From their hiding spot, Dakota could see the poachers working systematically around the train. They had ladders and climbing equipment, clearly preparing to reach the cub on top of the train car. The injured little animal was trapped, too weak to escape even if it wanted to. Ryder had gone completely silent in Dakota's arms, but his small body was tense with distress. His connection to the bear cub meant he could feel its fear and confusion as the strangers approached. "We have to do something," Dakota said. "We can't just sit here and watch them take that cub. Against 6 armed men?" Sage shook her head. "Dakota, I want to save that cub as much as you do, but we're 2 women, a baby, and a bear. We can't take on professional poachers." But then Ryder did something that changed everything. He began to make a new sound, different from all his previous bear calls. This was deeper, more complex, almost like he was speaking in complete sentences in the bear language. And Luna's response was immediate and dramatic. The massive mother bear rose to her full height and let out a roar that shook the mountain itself. It wasn't just a sound of anger or warning. It was a call to action. And from the darkness of the forest around them, other sounds began to answer. First one bear, then another, then several more. Luna's roar had summoned her entire family group, including the 2 older cubs that Sage had mentioned. But that wasn't all. Other bears were responding too. Bears from neighboring territories who recognized Luna's authority and understood her call for help. "My God," Sage whispered. "Ryder didn't just call to Luna. He called to all of them. He summoned every bear in these mountains." The poachers had heard the roars too, and Dakota could see them looking around nervously, their confidence shaken by the realization that they were surrounded by wild animals. But they were still armed, still dangerous, and still determined to capture the cub. That's when Dakota made a decision that surprised even herself. She handed Ryder to Sage and opened the truck door. "What are you doing?" Sage demanded. "Those men are here to steal a baby from its mother," Dakota said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "As a mother myself, I can't stand by and let that happen." But as she stepped out of the truck, something unexpected happened. The forest around them began to come alive with movement. Not just bears, but other animals too. Dakota saw the gleaming eyes of wolves in the darkness, the swift movement of mountain cats, even the smaller forms of foxes and raccoons. Ryder's call hadn't just summoned the bears. Somehow, his connection to the wild had reached every creature in these mountains, and they were all responding to his plea for help. "This is impossible," Sage breathed, staring at the gathering of animals. "Animals from different species don't cooperate like this. They don't form alliances." But Ryder was making his mysterious sounds again, and with each call, more animals emerged from the forest. It was as if the baby had awakened some ancient connection between all the wild creatures of the mountain, uniting them in a common cause. The poachers were starting to panic now. Their leader, a tall man with a grizzled beard, was shouting orders to his team, telling them to hurry up and get the cub before the situation got out of control. But Luna had other plans. The massive bear began to move toward the train, not charging but walking with deliberate purpose. The other bears followed her lead, forming a semicircle around the poacher's position. Dakota found herself walking alongside Luna, her fear replaced by a strange sense of rightness. This was what was supposed to happen. This was what Ryder's gift was meant for, not just communication between species, but unity in the face of injustice. The poachers raised their tranquilizer guns, but they were badly outnumbered now. For every weapon they had, there were 5 wild animals surrounding them, and leading them all was a human baby whose impossible gift had turned the mountain itself into an ally. But the most shocking revelation was still to come. As they approached the train, Dakota heard a sound that made her heart skip a beat. From the top of the train car where the injured cub lay, came an answering call to Ryder's summons. But it wasn't just one voice. It was 2. "There are 2 cubs up there," Sage said in amazement. "The injured one isn't alone." Luna heard it too, and her maternal fury doubled. She had been tracking one missing cub, but now she discovered that 2 of her babies were in danger. The poacher's leader saw the gathering crowd of animals and made a desperate decision. He aimed his tranquilizer gun not at the bears, but at Dakota. "Back off, or the woman gets it," he shouted. But before he could pull the trigger, something extraordinary happened. Ryder, still in Sage's arms back at the truck, let out a sound unlike anything he had made before. It was a command, pure and simple, spoken in a language that every creature on the mountain understood. Every animal in the forest responded at once. Bears roared, wolves howled, cats yowled, and even the birds in the trees began calling out in a cacophony of wild voices that drowned out everything else. The sound was so overwhelming, so primal and powerful, that the poachers dropped their weapons and covered their ears. It was the voice of the wilderness itself, channeled through a human baby who had somehow become its spokesperson. In that moment of chaos and confusion, Luna made her move. She charged toward the train, not to attack the humans but to reach her cubs. Her powerful claws found purchase on the metal sides of the train car, and within seconds she was climbing toward the roof where her babies waited. But the poachers recovered quickly. Their leader grabbed a more powerful rifle and took aim at Luna as she climbed. "No!" Dakota screamed, running toward the train without thinking about her own safety. What happened next would become the stuff of legend in those mountains. As the poacher's finger tightened on the trigger, every animal in the forest moved as one. Bears, wolves, cats, and dozens of smaller creatures charged toward the train simultaneously, creating a wall of fur and claws between the poachers and Luna. The poachers found themselves completely surrounded, their vehicles blocked, their escape routes cut off. They were trapped in the middle of the most incredible display of interspecies cooperation that any human had ever witnessed. And through it all, Ryder continued to make his calls, orchestrating the entire rescue operation with sounds that no human should have been able to make, yet somehow felt as natural as breathing to this extraordinary baby who had been born to speak for the voiceless. But as Luna reached the top of the train car, what she found there shattered everyone's understanding of the situation. The injured cub that had been riding the train wasn't just any bear cub. It was her youngest, barely 3 months old, the smallest and most vulnerable of her babies. But the second cub beside it wasn't one of hers at all. It was a human child, a little girl, probably around 3 years old, with tangled blonde hair and clothes torn from days of exposure to the elements. She was curled up next to the bear cub, her small arms wrapped protectively around the injured animal. Both children, one human, one bear, were unconscious from exhaustion and cold. "Oh my God," Sage breathed, lowering her binoculars. "There's a human child up there, a little girl." Dakota felt the world spinning around her. The mysterious connection between the cubs, the reason the train had been following such a specific route, the desperate nature of Luna's search, it all suddenly made horrible sense. "How long has she been up there?" Dakota asked, her maternal instincts screaming at the sight of the helpless child. Days, from the look of it, Sage replied grimly. She must have gotten lost in the mountains and somehow ended up with Luna's cub. They've been protecting each other. The poachers had seen the human child too, and their leader was barking new orders to his men. This changed everything for them. Capturing a bear cub was one thing, but a missing human child represented complications they hadn't planned for. If the girl died while in their custody, they would face murder charges. But their hesitation gave Luna the opening she needed. With maternal fury that transcended species, the massive bear gathered both children, her own cub and the human girl, into her powerful arms. The little girl stirred slightly at Luna's touch, opening her eyes just enough to see the bear's face above her. What happened next defied every instinct that humans had about wild animals. Instead of being frightened, the little girl smiled weakly and made a soft sound that was remarkably similar to the bear calls that Ryder had been making. She had learned to speak bear language during her days with the cub. Luna responded with the gentlest rumble Dakota had ever heard from such a massive creature. It was the sound a mother makes when comforting a frightened child, regardless of species. But the poachers weren't giving up. Their leader raised his rifle again, this time aiming directly at Luna. "I don't care about the human, kid," he shouted to his men. "We came here for the bear, and we're leaving with it. Shoot the mother if you have to." That's when Ryder's voice changed again. The baby let out a sound that was pure command, primal and ancient. It was the voice of the mountain itself, speaking through this impossible child who had somehow become the bridge between human and animal worlds. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every predator in the forest, bears, wolves, mountain cats, began moving toward the poachers with deadly intent. But they weren't attacking randomly. They were coordinated, organized, following some kind of battle plan that Ryder was somehow communicating to them. The smaller animals, foxes, raccoons, even squirrels, began creating chaos around the poachers' vehicles, chewing through tires and electrical wires, making escape impossible. The birds dove from the sky, creating a whirlwind of wings and claws that disoriented the men and made it impossible for them to aim their weapons. "This isn't natural," one of the poachers screamed, swatting at the birds attacking his face. "Animals don't act like this." But Sage understood what was happening. "It's not just natural," she called out to Dakota. "It's supernatural. Ryder isn't just communicating with individual animals. He's connected to the collective consciousness of the entire ecosystem." Luna, still holding both children, began to climb down from the train car. But she wasn't heading toward the forest to escape. Instead, she was walking directly toward Dakota and Sage, carrying the rescued children to the human she somehow trusted to help. The little girl in Luna's arms was more alert now, her eyes wide as she looked around at the chaotic scene. When she saw Dakota, she reached out her small hand and said something in a voice barely above a whisper. "Help. The baby bear, he's hurt." Dakota's heart broke at the child's words. Even after days of terror and exposure, the little girl's first concern was for the injured cub that had kept her warm and safe. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Dakota asked gently as Luna approached. "Emma," the girl whispered. "I got lost, in the woods, couldn't find Mommy and Daddy." Sage was already on her radio, calling for emergency medical assistance and law enforcement. "We need paramedics and search and rescue at the old Copper Creek mining site," she reported. "We have a missing child, an injured bear cub, and a group of armed poachers." But the poachers weren't finished yet. Their leader, desperate and furious at how badly their operation had gone wrong, made one final, terrible decision. He pulled out a grenade from his vest and held it high above his head. "Everyone back off or I blow us all to hell," he screamed. "I'm not going to prison for this." The forest fell silent. Every animal, as if understanding the nature of the threat, froze in place. Luna clutched the children closer to her chest, her protective instincts warring with the knowledge that she couldn't outrun an explosion. That's when Emma did something that would haunt Dakota's dreams and inspire her for the rest of her life. The 3-year-old girl, weak and exhausted from her ordeal, looked directly at the man with the grenade and began to sing. It wasn't a song in any human language. It was something older, more primal, a melody that seemed to come from the mountain itself. The same ancient connection that allowed Ryder to speak to animals was flowing through this little girl, who had survived in the wilderness by learning to communicate with bears. The effect on the poacher was immediate and shocking. His face went pale, his hand began to shake, and the grenade slipped from his fingers. But instead of exploding, it landed in the soft pine needles at his feet and rolled harmlessly away. "What?" he stammered, staring at Emma in confusion and growing fear. "What are you—" Emma continued to sing, her voice growing stronger despite her physical weakness. And as she sang, something incredible began to happen. The other poachers stopped struggling against the animals surrounding them. Their weapons fell from their hands, and their faces took on expressions of wonder and confusion. The little girl's song wasn't just affecting the criminals. It was touching something deep within every living creature in the area, including Dakota and Sage. It was a sound of pure innocence, of connection to nature that modern humans had forgotten, but which still lived in the hearts of children who hadn't yet learned to fear the wild. "She's like Ryder," Sage whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She's another bear speaker, but her gift is different. She can touch the human heart the same way she touches the animal spirit." The poachers, their will broken by Emma's otherworldly song, surrendered without further resistance. They dropped their weapons and sat down heavily, looking like men who had been awakened from a terrible dream and couldn't understand how they had gotten so lost. Luna gently lowered both children to the ground near Dakota. The bear cub was indeed injured, its left paw swollen and probably broken, but it was alive and alert. Emma immediately went to the cub's side, stroking its fur and making soft, comforting sounds in the bear language she had learned. "We need to get them both to a veterinarian and a hospital," Dakota said. But as she reached for Emma, something unexpected happened. The little girl looked up at her with eyes that seemed far too old for her 3-year-old face. "The mountain is crying," Emma said in perfect English, her voice filled with a sadness that made Dakota's heart ache. "All the animals are scared because the humans keep taking their babies away." Before Dakota could respond, Emma turned to Luna and made a series of complex bear sounds. Luna listened intently, then responded with her own calls. They were having a conversation that was clearly meaningful to both of them. "What are they saying?" Dakota asked Sage. Sage listened carefully, her years of bear research helping her interpret some of the exchange. She's asking Luna to forgive humans for what the bad men tried to do. And Luna is telling her that not all humans are bad, that some humans, like us, want to help. But then Luna made a sound that was clearly a question, and she looked directly at Ryder in Sage's arms. Emma translated, her small voice serious and thoughtful. "Luna wants to know why the human baby can speak to her. She says she's never met a human who could talk to bears before, except—" Emma paused, her brow furrowing in concentration. "Except for the old stories her grandmother told her." Dakota felt another chill run down her spine. What old stories? Emma listened to more bear sounds from Luna, then turned back to Dakota with those wise, ancient eyes. Long ago, when the world was younger, there were humans who could speak to all the animals. They were the protectors, the ones who kept peace between the human world and the animal world. But they disappeared when the humans forgot how to listen to the earth. And now, they're coming back, Sage said quietly, looking from Ryder to Emma. 2 children, born in these mountains with the ability to bridge the gap between species. It can't be a coincidence. But Emma wasn't finished with her translation. Luna was making more sounds, longer and more complex, and the little girl's face grew troubled as she listened. Luna says the mountain is in danger, Emma finally said. Not just from the bad men who steal animals, but from something bigger. Something that's going to hurt all the animals and all the humans too, if the bear speakers don't stop it. Before anyone could ask what Luna meant, the sound of helicopters filled the air. Search and rescue had arrived, along with law enforcement to deal with the poachers. The magical moment in the forest was about to be interrupted by the practical needs of the modern world. But as the helicopters circled overhead, casting their searchlights down through the trees, Luna did something that would change everything for Dakota and her family. The massive bear walked directly up to Dakota and gently touched Ryder's tiny hand with her enormous paw. The moment their skin made contact, Dakota felt a jolt of something. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. In that instant, she knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't the end of their connection to Luna and her family. It was just the beginning. Luna made one final sound to Emma, who nodded solemnly and then looked up at Dakota. Luna says she's giving you and Ryder the protection of the Bear Clan, Emma translated. She says you're family now, and family takes care of each other. But she also says there's a great darkness coming to the mountains, and only the bear speakers can stop it. What kind of darkness? Dakota asked. But the helicopters were getting closer, and Luna was already backing away toward the tree line. Emma took Dakota's hand with her small, cold fingers. Luna doesn't know exactly what it is, the little girl said. But she knows it has something to do with why the trains have been running strange routes through the mountains, and why so many animals have been disappearing. The realization hit Dakota like a physical blow. The poachers they had just defeated weren't working alone. They were part of something bigger, something that threatened the entire ecosystem of these mountains. As the first helicopter landed in the clearing and paramedics rushed toward them, Dakota looked down at Ryder in her arms. Her baby had stopped making his bear sounds and was now sleeping peacefully, as if the rescue of Luna's cub had fulfilled some cosmic purpose he didn't even understand. But Emma wasn't sleeping. The 3-year-old girl was wide awake and alert, her eyes scanning the forest around them as if she was already preparing for whatever threat Luna had warned them about. "Emma," Dakota said gently, "where are your parents? Where do you live?" The little girl's answer sent chills through both Dakota and Sage. "I don't remember," Emma said simply. I think I've been in the mountains for a very long time. Longer than just a few days. Luna says I'm like her cub now. I belong to the wilderness." As the paramedics began examining both children, Dakota caught Sage's eye. They both understood that they had stumbled into something much larger and more dangerous than a simple animal rescue. 2 children with impossible gifts, ancient legends coming to life, and a mysterious threat that required bear speakers to stop it. The adventure was far from over. In fact, Dakota had the growing feeling that it was just beginning. And somewhere in the darkness of the forest, Luna watched the humans take care of her cub and the strange human child who had protected him. The great bear's intelligence told her that the peace they had won tonight was temporary. The real battle for the heart and soul of these mountains was still to come. But for the first time in years, Luna felt hope. The bear speakers had returned, just as the old stories promised they would. And perhaps, just perhaps, that would be enough to save both the human world and the animal world from the darkness that was coming. 3 weeks later, Dakota stood on the back porch of the small cabin she had rented near Millfield Station, watching Ryder play in the yard. Her 8-month-old son sat in the grass, babbling contentedly to a family of rabbits that had emerged from the nearby woods. The rabbits seemed to understand him perfectly, their ears twitching in response to his soft sounds. Emma was there too, legally in Dakota's care now after extensive searches had failed to locate any family members who remembered her. The authorities had finally concluded that she must have been abandoned in the wilderness as a very young child and survived by learning to live with the animals. It was an impossible story, but the evidence was undeniable. The 3-year-old girl was healthier now, her blonde hair clean and shining, her torn clothes replaced with warm, comfortable outfits. But her eyes still held that ancient wisdom, and she still spoke to the forest creatures in their own languages. "Mama Dakota," Emma said, tugging on Dakota's sleeve. "Luna is coming." Dakota looked toward the tree line and saw the massive form of the mother bear emerging from the forest. Luna's injured cub walked beside her, his paw fully healed thanks to the wildlife veterinarian who had treated him after the rescue. The cub was bigger now, stronger, but he still remembered the humans who had saved his life. Luna approached the cabin slowly, respectfully, the way she had learned to do during her previous visits. She had come to check on Emma and Ryder every few days since the incident at the train, bringing gifts from the forest. Interesting stones, beautiful feathers, sweet berries that were safe for humans to eat. "Tell Luna that Dr. Martinez said her baby's paw is completely healed," Dakota told Emma. "He'll be able to run and climb just like his siblings." Emma translated, and Luna's response was a sound of deep satisfaction and gratitude. The great bear then made a more complex series of calls, and Emma's face grew serious as she listened. "Luna says the bad men were part of something bigger," Emma translated. "She says there are others still in the mountains, still trying to hurt the animals. But she also says—" Emma paused, listening to more bear sounds. "She says the forest spirits are awakening because the bear speakers have returned. The animals are getting stronger, braver. They're not afraid anymore." Dakota felt a warmth spread through her chest. The thought that Ryder and Emma were somehow healing the relationship between humans and wildlife filled her with a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. Sage emerged from the cabin, carrying a cup of coffee and smiling at the familiar scene. The wildlife researcher had become like family to them, helping Dakota navigate the complexities of raising 2 children with supernatural gifts while also documenting their abilities for the scientific community. "Any word from the authorities about the poaching investigation?" Dakota asked. "The FBI traced the operation to an international wildlife trafficking ring," Sage replied. "But here's the interesting part. Ever since Ryder and Emma's encounter with those men, similar operations across the country have been falling apart. It's like the animals are fighting back in coordinated ways that shouldn't be possible." Emma giggled and pointed toward the forest. "The animals are talking to each other now. Ryder and I taught them how." Dakota looked at her adopted daughter with wonder. Even after weeks of witnessing impossible things, she was still amazed by the children's abilities. Luna made one final series of sounds to Emma, then gently touched both children with her enormous paws. It was a blessing, Dakota realized. A mother's blessing for the human cubs she had claimed as her own. As Luna prepared to return to the forest with her healed cub, something magical happened. Animals began emerging from the woods, not just bears but deer, foxes, wolves, mountain cats, and dozens of smaller creatures. They formed a circle around the cabin, all of them looking toward Ryder and Emma with what could only be described as reverence. "What are they doing?" Dakota whispered. Emma closed her eyes and listened to sounds that only she and Ryder could hear, the voices of the forest itself. When she opened her eyes, they were filled with tears of joy. "They're saying thank you," Emma said softly. "All of them. They're saying thank you to the bear speakers for bringing peace back to the mountains." Ryder, still too young to understand the full significance of what was happening, simply giggled and clapped his hands. But his laughter created a ripple effect through the gathered animals. They began making their own sounds, not calls of distress or warning, but sounds of happiness and celebration. The forest was singing. Dakota picked up Ryder and pulled Emma close, tears streaming down her face as she realized what they had accomplished. They hadn't just saved one bear cub from a group of poachers. They had helped restore something ancient and precious, the connection between all living things. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, the animals gradually returned to the forest. But they weren't disappearing forever. Dakota knew they would be back, checking on the bear speakers, seeking guidance, offering protection. Luna was the last to leave. The great bear stood at the edge of the clearing and looked back at the humans one final time. Her message was clear without words. The mountains were safe now, protected by ancient magic that had returned just when it was needed most. That night, as Dakota tucked both children into their beds, Emma looked up at her with those wise, ancient eyes. "Mama Dakota," the little girl said softly, "do you know what the best part of being a bear speaker is?" "What's that, sweetheart?" Emma smiled, and for a moment she looked like any normal 3-year-old child. "The best part is that we never have to be scared of being alone. No matter where we go, we always have family in the forest." Dakota kissed Emma's forehead, then went to check on Ryder. Her baby son was sleeping peacefully, one tiny hand curled around a small pine cone that Luna's cub had brought him as a gift. As Dakota stood in the doorway watching her children sleep, she thought about the incredible journey that had brought them all together. A terrified bear cub clinging to a train had led to the discovery that her son possessed an impossible gift. That gift had brought them Emma, a lost child who had survived in the wilderness by learning to speak the language of bears. Together, the three of them had become something new. A family bound not just by love, but by a mystical connection to the natural world that would guide and protect them for the rest of their lives. Outside, the mountains stood silent and peaceful under a canopy of stars. But in the darkness, thousands of creatures great and small knew that the bear speakers had returned. The ancient contract between humans and animals had been renewed, and the wilderness was whole again. And in a small cabin near Millfield Station, 3 people who had been brought together by fate slept soundly, protected by the love of a mother bear and blessed with gifts that would keep the wild places of the world safe for generations to come. The train tracks still ran through the mountains, but now they carried only cargo and passengers to their intended destinations. The bears roamed free and unafraid. The forest sang with joy instead of fear. And whenever a child in those mountains felt lost or alone, they would sometimes hear soft sounds in the darkness, the gentle calls of the bear speakers, reminding them that they were never truly alone in a world where humans and animals could still speak to each other's hearts. The mountain had found its voice again, and that voice would echo through the generations, ensuring that the wild places would always have protectors who understood that all living things are connected by bonds stronger than words, deeper than fear, and more enduring than time itself.